Welcome back to True Stories Paranormal Survivor. Today is all about dolls. I have had quite the experience with dolls, and I'm going to tell you, dolls always seem to make their way into the paranormal world as a means of communication. And I get it. It can be quite terrifying to have an experience with a doll. I mean, because many of you know this is something that, we grew up seeing, or we've seen in maybe a grandma's house, or, obviously in a store. And these things don't just move on their own. They don't talk. They don't walk. They do nothing. They're just a plastic, playful thing that just kind of hangs out. So whenever these dolls tend to make their way into the paranormal world, investigators and mediums, all of us, have a great interest in what they are trying to communicate. Although, I don't think I've ever spoken to an investigator who said that they didn't get creeped out by it. Because I know that it has been something that has been quite fascinating for me. When I lived in the haunted house, we had an experience with a doll, when my children had an experience with a doll, where the doll was actually in one of their rooms. And they were quite certain that, that's where that doll was. And then they go into my closet, which had majority of all of the activity, which was always around me. The other family members experienced quite a lot as well. But it was in my room, in my closet, where, all of the children, when all of the kids were away from the doll, no one was near it, no one was playing with it. And later on, that doll found its way in my closet. Now, as many of you know who have been listening and keeping up with this podcast, thank you so much. You know that place was not just haunted. The spirits that resided in that home were negative, dark, and evil. So when that doll was moved there, that was to get our attention. They weren't just saying, there's something that I want to communicate in. I'm here and I want to have a chat and I want to talk to you. They were trying to get our attention. Now, remember, you guys, for things to move from location to location, or for things to move, that takes quite a lot of energy. That takes a lot. When things start moving in your home, falling over, being tossed, all the things that I experienced in my home, vases falling and all that stuff, that takes a lot of energy. So for that doll to move from one location and end up in my closet, that was a powerful movement and a powerful source, making a big, bold statement. So there is a doll that I just experienced. I want to say a day or so ago, and cannot wait to talk to you about what happened next. Now, when I was walking into my bedroom, similar to the last episode, again, I get a sense of something. Now, not all the time am I going to give attention to what is around me, because I know I was talking to my mom about something similar recently, and the first thing she said was, don't talk to them. Don't communicate. Don't talk to them. But I do know when to discern and when not to. And this time, when I had the experience with the doll, I knew right away what was happening. I knew right away that it was a somber spirit, meaning that it could have been not could have been, meaning that the sense that I get, is more of a calmer spirit, a lighthearted spirit, one that is not there to do any harm. That's why I stated in the very beginning that sometimes grandparents have dolls, and they keep these dolls and they collect these dolls. I know my grandmother had dolls laying around, and my uncle used to buy a lot of dolls because I spent a lot of time with my grandmother and bring them around and buy a lot of clothing, and my grandmother would make a lot of clothing. So it's something very comforting to the elderly about dolls. And so that's kind of how this spirit came through. Didn't feel like a negative spirit. And immediately they said dolls. So I'm thinking, I do have 2 dolls in my room. One doll I created myself to pair with one of the books that I wrote and illustrated. And I created this kind of like a rag doll. And I would take her with me whenever I read the book in schools. So she kind of would hang out with me. Hadn't had that doll around me, It's been in a different location, put away. I also had a doll made for my daughters. Very lifelike looking doll. And everything I'm talking about now can be found on at Rashika Roberts on my Instagram, or the Natural Chick on TikTok. Okay, this a lot of what I'm talking about, so you'll get a chance to actually see what I am referring to. Now I get a sense that I want to see the doll, so I have these 2 dolls in my room, and at the time, and I go, okay, so you want to see the doll, and it's quite different, my friends, whenever I am just communicating and it's just me in the room, It could look kind of strange if somebody was to actually walk in the room, whatever. So what I've been, wanting to do and drawn to do now is actually sit the EMF down and communicate with these entities. Because it makes it more authentic for me, more realistic for me, and also you get a chance to see what is going on. So I turn off all the lights and I sit the EMF in the chair and I begin to communicate with the entity that is in the room with me. And sure enough, I ask, do you want to see the doll? Are you interested in the doll? And the EMF goes off and it begins to start blinking. And I actually tell whomever is in the room to give me just a second and I will be retrieving the doll. There were 2 dolls, my friends, and the person in the room was specific on which doll they wanted to see. I sit the doll in the chair and the EMF goes crazy. I mean, it's way leveling up to red and all that stuff. And quite fascinating because that let me know, for us, it is more of a confirmation that what we are hearing and sensing and sometimes seeing is actually there. It's actually real. These things are not, as I have told you before, not all in your head. And so they were quite excited when I sat the doll down and just flaring up. So I started asking questions. You want to see this doll? Are you fascinated by this doll? And my friends, it was going quite crazy over there. And I could have just walked off and totally ignored this entity that was in the room. Again, this can be quite creepy. And I know some of you listening are probably going to think, isn't that just a way for you to be just bringing stuff into your home? Well, let me remind you, they're always with me. they're always finding me. And they always want to communicate. And I find it now a blessing to, have the gift to be able to find closure, and to help these entities, whom of which probably have crossed over. And think about it. There was a time on the planet where there was this thing that they loved so much and they, connected with so much. And in their next life, that could be something that they do not have or cannot have for whatever reason. And they have the opportunity to have that thing for a short moment. And they see it in my room and they think, well, she is one of those people who actually can communicate with me and give me the opportunity to connect with this thing once again. And I find nothing at all, and let me repeat, absolutely nothing that is bad with that and wrong with that, although so many people in the world think that is, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But my friends, I have sat down with people who needed, like this entity, who needed to hear that a family member was around, or a family member was going to be at the wedding, or a family member has been paying attention and knew that they were about to have another child. This is something that actually has helped them. So if I'm ever around you, because this happens to me all the time, and I begin to give you a message from a loved one, and you're looking like, oh Lord, don't let this crazy lady talk to me, just remember, it's kind of like the doll. Just because they are on the other side doesn't mean that they don't want to or don't try to connect. And we'll talk more on tomorrow.